Well, if you love to read a nail-biting, cliff-hanging thriller, chances are you know the novels of Andrew Klavan. If not, you may have seen one of the movies based on them. Take a look.
Andrew Klavan is a best-selling author of tough guy thrillers. Some of his novels were made into movies, such as True Crime, filmed by Clint Eastwood, and Don't Say a Word with Michael Douglas. Despite their grittiness, his novels have always contained a search for truth, something that Andrew has done throughout his entire adult life. In his memoir, The Great Good Thing, Andrew shares how his lifelong search for answers led him to a place he never expected.
Please welcome to the 700 Club, Andrew Klavan. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Thanks.
The Great Good Thing, your book, is subtitled A Secular Jew Comes to Faith in Christ.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about your childhood, because it had strong impact on you. I guess it does for all of us.
Sure.
But in your scenario, your family was Jewish, but not practicing.
Well, we were practicing in the sense that it was very important to my father to train us up in the traditions and the rights and all this.
Child.
And so, you know, we went to Hebrew school, we went to temple on holy days and all this. But underneath this, my parents didn't believe in God. My mother was one of the, to the day she died, she was really one of the most convicted atheists I have ever met.
Really?
And yeah, my father would hedge his bets, you know, he was the kind of guy who didn't like to, he didn't want to take any chances. But it really became clear to me that all these things that I was being trained in, and Judaism is a very beautiful religion with a wonderful tradition. But if you take God out of it, it becomes an empty room. It becomes a cathedral that's built pointing at nothing. And so that began to bother me. I was always a kid who wanted things to make sense, and it didn't make any sense to me to pray to a God who wasn't there.
And it bothered you at an early age. I mean, you were bar mitzvahed at 13
yeah.
And here you are, not really having been taught to relate to God in any way.
Right.
By 14, were you pretty sure yourself that there wasn't a God, or where were you at?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was standing up there. It was very difficult for me to stand in front of an audience and say these words that I knew in my heart I didn't believe. And, you know, in those days, in that neighborhood, when you were bar mitzvahed, people gave you a lot of wonderful jewelry and savings bonds. So I had this big box, a big leather box filled with thousands of dollars worth of gifts.
Wow.
And I was thrilled, of course, you know, 13.
Sure.
I didn't, but over the months that followed, I began to feel that it was ill-gotten gains, that I had gotten it by telling a lie. And one night, I took the box and I crept outside when everyone was asleep, and I pushed it into the garbage and let them take it away.
Really?
Because I wanted to be free of the sense that I had lied, that something was off between me and my integrity.
You know, that quest for truth in you was almost built into you from the time you were very, very young. And eventually, because of the emptiness of all the things you're talking about, it led to a clinical depression. And you share how you found yourself in the darkest night of your life. Share that.
It was really quite bad. I mean, here I was. I had a wife that I loved so much, and a daughter at that point. Later, I'd have a son, but I had a daughter. And I remember sitting in a room thinking, I can't live anymore. I don't know how to live. And I was sitting in the dark. I was smoking and I was drinking. I was listening to a baseball game that was on in the background. And there was this Christian ball player whom I loved, Gary Carter. And I remember thinking, I don't know how to live. And just as I was thinking this, Carter was interviewed on the radio about how he could run in so much pain. And he just said very simply, he said, sometimes you've got to play in pain. And the minute I heard that, I thought, I can do that. I can do that. I'm in terrible depression. I'm in terrible pain, but I can keep playing. And I did. And things turned around.
So, Andrew, how did you go from that place of being almost on the verge of being willing to let go of life to finding Christ? Because it wasn't a Damascus Road experience for you.
No, you know, well, first of all, I had to get, you know, therapy to become a happier person.
I so admired you for doing that. As I read that, I thought, yes, it's a good thing to do that.
It is, and I was so stubborn that I couldn't turn to God when I needed help. I needed to turn to God I was afraid it would be a crutch, you know, because I wanted to be honest. But after I got healthy and after my mind was right, it became clear to me that all the philosophies that didn't include God didn't make sense. And so I accepted not Christ, but God, and started to pray, and that transformed my life. And it took about 5 years of prayer that changed everything. And then one day, when I realized what had happened to me, I was driving in the hills over Santa Barbara, and I said to God, you know, you've changed my life. What can I do for you? Because I'm nobody. You know, you're God and I'm nobody. And almost as if it were spoken into my ear, I heard God say, now you should be baptized. And I said out loud, baptized? You've got to be kidding! Because here I was.
But I'm Jewish.
I'm Jewish. You know, I really had no religion whatsoever, just this faith in God, which had then become very clear to me. And so that began a process where I thought, how did that happen? Where did that voice come from? Was it a real voice, or was it a delusion? Was something I had to really question myself about it? Very difficult.
So how did you get to the baptism? And because with family, with friends, with the business you were in, I mean, that was a pretty public statement.
It was tough. I mean, I knew it would, and it did hurt me in Hollywood. I was writing screenplays and selling them continually, and there's a lot of hostility to God in Hollywood. I knew it would estrange me from some friends, and it did. And I was fearful. You know, my father and I never really got along, but we had made a separate peace, and he had once said to me that if I ever converted, he would disown me. And I thought, here I am going to do this thing that's going to bring pain and suffering into my house. And I thought, I'm going to have to tell him, because I'm a public man, he's going to see it somewhere. And he came to visit, and as I was wrestling with how to break it to him, he said, I've got to go home. I'm suffering from double vision. And it turned out that he had a brain tumor. It was his final illness. And so I realized I couldn't break his heart in the last 6 months of his life. And it was a very weird double life I started living, because I would go to New York to visit him, and then I would leave his apartment and go visit my friend, this Episcopal priest who was preparing me for baptism. And it was really, it came to a head on what was both Holy Week and Passover, when my father passed away. And then very shortly afterwards, I was baptized.
You know, your book is just such a great picture of your journey. You're very candid about things. What do you want people to take away from The Great Good Thing when they read it? I
think the most important thing to me is I think so many of us, it's not just Jewish people, so many of us live in this secular world where atheism is the default setting. And we're told that if you're smart, you don't believe. And scientists come out and say, there's no God. I've proved it in my science and all this stuff. They're wrong. It's not true. And I wanted to show you how a very logical person, a person dedicated to truth, could come through that and come out of that and find the real truth, and the truth that would make you happy, without leaving behind reality and just grasping the real reality, the full reality of life. And I hope that it works like that for some people.
It's a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us today. It's fascinating, and there's much more to it than we've had time to cover. You can read it all in his new memoir. It's called The Great Good Thing. It's available wherever books are sold. Plus, you can watch a web-exclusive interview with Andrew on our Facebook page. To see that, log on to facebook.com/700 Club. Andrew, great to have you here.
Thank you, Terry.